Welcome, everybody. This is a humorous history podcast, and we are, in fact, the Goofy Historians. Today, we're going to talk about Luther. We're going to talk, and this is Martin Luther, the original guy, not Martin Luther King, because there's no comparison. You can't compare Martin Luther King Jr. to Martin Luther. There's just Martin Luther King Jr. is still relevant today. Luther is not. But I wish he was, because I would love to see like the Methodist Mormon alliance against the praying in tongues Catholics or something like that. That would be great. But it's not. This is Martin Luther, the original guy, and he was born in 1483. He died in 1546 at the age of 63. Just a quick disclosure up front that I forgot is that we're not real historians. We try to be funny, but we're not comedians. You can visit us on Patreon and all that. Okay, so he died at 63. So he lived to be a pretty good age. He got married, which is interesting for a friar, because a priest's not supposed to get married. But anyway, he got married in 1525 to the love of his life, Katharina, and they had 6 kids. And to tell you how influential this guy is, all 6 of his kids from the 16th century, they all have their Wikipedia page today. So you can have fun and preview all of the kids that he had. One was actually named Martin Luther. Anyway, he entered the priesthood at age 24 in the year 1507. Still, nobody knew about him yet, right? He was just an invisible person. He became a professor of theology. He was obviously a priest. He became an author. They say he was a composer. Haven't heard any of his work. He was an August.
Sure you have. Sure you have.
Have I?
Yeah.
Composer?
Mighty fortress is our God. You ever heard of that? Yes,
No way. Okay, so there is a Martin Luther song. That's definitely going on Patreon.
Yeah,
Can you sing
gotta
a
do
verse of
that.
that?
Yeah. A mighty fortress is our God. We even used to sing that in the Catholic Church,
He
for
wrote
God's
that?
sake. Yeah, he wrote that.
Oh, good
Go
for
Luther,
him.
huh?
See, I'm
Yeah.
starting to like Luther already because I kind of was. I'm hoping this doesn't turn into a Henry VIII where we just hate on
It
him
it
for
it
an
it,
hour.
it might.
It
Luther,
probably
Luther
will.
Luther is a dickhead. But the thing about Luther being a fart ass, that would be one thing he would totally agree with me on. He would go, "Yeah, I am a fart ass, and so are you, and so are we all." It's like that's okay.
Well, he did some
I
cool
mean,
things.
I even have a quote of him calling himself a fart ass. So,
Really.
I mean, it's okay.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Because he was the kind of person who could not reply. That's a
You could not
skill
shut up.
that takes that I wish I had that skill, because someone says something stupid, I'm just automatically blah blah blah. And sometimes it's better just to not say anything, even if you're right. Luther could not reply. As soon as somebody said shit about him, he would be blasting them back, as far as I knew. But he probably had some self-degradation stuff that was funny. But he did some cool things. He had a lot of quotes. We're not going to go into all of them, but I do like the one, peace if possible, truth at all costs. I thought that was a good quote.
Yeah, but unless truth is all it costs means burning Jews and heretics, I mean, what cost is he gonna? I mean, that's what he gets into the dark side, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he gets into all this scary nationalistic stuff, uh, anti-Semitic, anti-Islamic. I mean, good thing there were no gay people back there. I'm sure he'd be anti-gay. you know.
That's true. And then Michelangelo would have been pissed off, because I'm
Oh
pretty
yeah,
sure
yeah.
Michelangelo is
Michelangelo
gay.
would have been pissed, and Da Vinci. So I mean, this was. We have to question that too. Like, I mean, I don't think you could call Luther a Renaissance man for heaven's sake, or even a humanist. a Catholic humanist, but I don't think he would have been possible without the Renaissance, right? And certainly not without the printing press, right?
Right. So
I mean, so in his little tracts, when the Catholics were putting up, the Sistine Chapel and Da Vinci and Michelangelo, the little tracts of Martin Luther showed peasants shitting in the hat of the Pope, right? It's like, that's not cool, Luther. I mean, why do you want to do that, right?
well,
That's just
this
sick.
I think that he may have had an event like Henry VIII where he fell off a horse and hit his head or something, because it goes gradually, right? Because he didn't
It
start
does.
out
It does. When he
because
starts out, he's not that bad, right? You can actually kind of like, well, he had mental problems from the beginning, right? I think he was probably abused by his father. His father was his up and coming peasant who was trying to overreach, and he was sending poor Luther to law school. I mean, that's abuse by itself, forcing someone to go to law school.
well, he was a tenacious little kid. He did teach himself how to read, but let's talk about the good stuff. Okay, so let's talk about when he gets famous. Okay, because nobody knows who the hell he is, right? Um, and he didn't get excommunicated until 1521 at the age of 38. But if a couple things were, he was an opportunist. Pieces were in play, right? Like you said, he wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the Renaissance. It wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the printing press. And it wouldn't have happened if the Pope didn't need money to build the basilica, because that just drained it took 186 years and 46 million ducats. But anyway, so he needed money, and that was one of the main reasons for the last round of indulgences. And I guess we need to explain what an indulgence is in case somebody
Yeah,
doesn't
I
know.
can explain that. Yeah,
Go ahead.
but I mean, I want to go back to his youth because I think that's important. I'll be quick. I mean, I
Okay.
think his father was a domineering. He was probably beat by his father. The father needed him to go to law school so he could like move up a social notch or two. But it turns out Luther was afraid of lightning, right? He was afraid of storms. And he was walking through a field and there was a lightning storm, and he prayed to Mary, or Mary's mother, because he didn't feel he deserved Mary, so he prayed to Mary's mother. And he said, if you save me from this lightning storm, I'll become a monk. And so as soon as he said that, the storm cleared up, the sky came out, and he walked over and put himself in a monastery. But first he had to tell his father that he's dropping out of law school, right? To become a monk. And his father go, monking makes no money. Yeah, there is no
Monkey?
money in monking.
Is that what you call it? Monkey? I'm going to go
That's
be a
what
monk. Are you going to be monkeying all day long?
what are you doing? And what are you going to be a monker for, right? So, but he made a deal with Mary. I mean, whatever Mary's mother is, I forgot what her name was. But so he becomes a monk, and he tells them, I made this vow, I got to become a monk. And then, so they put him in a cell, and I guess he's jacking off or something because he feels really bad about everything. He hates himself. He hates himself horribly, right? For some reason, right? He just hates himself. He thinks he's a bag of shit. And then his confessor goes, well, you got to stop that. And then what happened was, well, he went to Rome. It was during the time of Leo, right? The Renaissance, the Medici Pope, right? Who's
Right.
like having a
11th.
blast, right? And Luther is going, well, here I'm trying so hard to become a good monk. I'm taking my monking really seriously, and here's like these popes, getting down and partying, right? He says, this can't be right, right? This can't be right. And who knows if even I'm doing it right? And he climbed up these steps and he's going, my God, does this even mean anything? So he's disillusioned with the whole monking thing, right? So then he goes back. And like you said, they needed money to pay for Da Vinci and all their parties. And Leo, the one who said, I think it's Pope Leo who said, God made me Pope and I'm going to enjoy it. Right? And so he had all these hunting parties and chasing women and having kids. And to afford this lifestyle, and then so like the elector, of Saxony, where like Luther is, he bought that cardinal's hat, right? He bought it, right? And he had to borrow money from the Fugger Bank, right? And then the Fuggers come back and say, well, now you got to pay us back. We need the money because you loaned it to us. So he goes to the Pope, Leo, and he goes, Leo, I can't pay. I need money, right? And Leo's go, well, I don't have any money, man. I have to pay for Da Vinci and Michelangelo and my parties. So he says, why don't you go sell some indulgences, right? So he wrote a bunch of these blank check indulgences to the Prince of Saxony, Frederick of Saxony or something. And he goes there and he's selling these indulgences right outside of Luther's church, right? Right after Luther gets back from Rome, right? So Luther is going, that can't be right. Right? You can't be. First of all, it's not even true, right? Because so Luther goes, these indulgences don't mean anything, right? It's like you don't. It's like they were buying these. People were buying these indulgences ahead of time, right? For sins they're going to commit. Like if you're going to a party, it's like the day before pill or whatever you know. It's like you buy your indulgences before you go party, right? So then you can sin, you know, on the weekend and have already be resolved, right? And so Luther is going, this can't be true, right? This is just wrong. So he writes this 95 theses and sends it to the Pope, or no, sends it to the bishop.
Nails it to the door.
Well, that's what they say. Maybe he got mailed to the door. Initially, he just mails it or emails it or something. It's like, and he mails it.
He sent an email.
But he mails it to the guy who just got this deal from the Pope to sell the indulgences, right? Yeah. So he can pay off the Fugger Bank because he just bought his, and he bought the bishopric when he was 16, right?
Who are we talking about?
Okay, so we're Luther.
You're not talking about Leo X, and you're not talking about Martin Luther. You're talking about
yes, I am talking about.
You're talking about the dude who's going to sell the indulgences.
Right, because that was the whole crisis.
And what's his name? We don't know. He's just some dude.
Yeah, I do. He was but he was the bishop.
Well, anyway, it doesn't matter.
Of Wittenberg. He was the bishop of where Luther is. So he's selling indulgences outside of Luther's church.
Yeah, so Luther gets pissed off. But he gets pissed off at everybody, not just that dude. He's pissed off at Leo X. He's pissed off at Catholicism and everything. And he just goes crazy. And those 95 theses, those weren't all about indulgences. The indulgences was 50 and 51. That's it. So he had 94 other ones or 96 other ones. He was so goddamn long-winded. He couldn't stop. He just like, and he's like, you know what? It might have been better to be more, you know, to summarize it and be like, here's the main shit. The indulgences gotta stop. But no, 95.
It's like, yeah, you would hate to go to a PowerPoint presentation given by Luther, right? Here's 95 PowerPoints, 95, you know, bullet points. You go, Luther, cut.
He'd be like that president who died because his speech was an hour and 45 minutes in the rain, and he died 30 days after that.
Probably, but the 94th, I think most of them were about indulgences, but the 94th was about indulgences. He says, whoever uses their indulgences to get out of purgatory is going to hell, right? Which is pretty nasty, right? Especially considering he's Luther, who you don't know, right? Heaven is the faith. And the Pope who gave it to you is going to hell. And he sent, so these things get to the Pope, and the Pope, which would be a great opportunity, right? It would have been I think a great opportunity was really missed, where you could have really reformed the Pope, the church. I mean, the church needed to be reformed, right? But the reply back was that the Pope Leo replied back, says, not only are the indulgences correct, there's two other things we're going to come up with, right? Which was never done before in the whole history of the Catholic Church. One was that the Pope is infallible. The Pope is never wrong, right? And the second one, if the Pope contradicts the Bible, the Pope's right, right? So he replies back to Luther, not only that indulgences are correct, but that the Pope is infallible and the Pope is superior to the Bible. And then Luther goes, well, shit, this has just got a whole quantum level higher than what I was trying to. He wasn't even saying indulgences are bad. He was just said it has to be part of a process. You just can't buy forgiveness and get into heaven. So that was really what started the Reformation.
Well, good. So the Reformation gets going, and so it started. Leo X was the first pope that Luther
Had to
went
deal with
through.
Luther, yeah.
But he also went through Julius, Pope Clement, and finally Pope Paul II. And over all those years, when it finally got to Pope Paul II, Pope Paul II is like, you know what? I capitulate. There will be Lutherans. But you know what? It's okay, because the number of Protestants that we lost to this Reformation is just a drop in the ocean compared
of
to
all these
the
Indians
new world
converting.
souls, all the souls of the new world. So they're like, you know what? It's okay. We'll lose a little bit here, but we've got North and South America, which is way bigger. So it kind of gave Luther a break, in the sense that at some point it just took on a life of its own, and there is Lutheranism. Lutheranism. It's so crazy. So Protestantism, and we can talk about it, and it's so exhausting. It's like he just couldn't stop writing. I think I told you about it. I think he's just like the most famous boring person. The only exciting thing he ever really did was he'd go to bars and talk shit, and I think he'd like practice like what he was gonna write, all drunk, blah 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 blah, and then he'd write it, and just he couldn't stop writing. And yeah, okay, so he was brave, because if they would have caught him, they would have burned him. But he was protected by people that it was in their best interest to promote him, because the princes of the German states were no fan of the Catholic Church. So he was an opportunist more than anything. And he was totally misguided on Muslims and Jews. And I want to, before you start talking about the Jews, I think it's so funny, because that's one of the things that he is really known for. And once you open the hood and look at Martin Luther, he's known for kind of being an anti-Semitic kind of guy. But I often think, did he really even go through the thought experiment? Did he even go through that? Or was he just ranting? It was like a rant. It was like the Mel Gibson rant, right? Mel Gibson breaks up with his wife.
I don't know. No, I mean, modern day anti-Semitism is more racial. I don't think it was racial for Luther. I think it was religious. Right?
Well, let's hear what
he said.
This is what you said last time.
Martin Luther, who was the first successful. There were other Protestants, but this is the first successful. He argues that Jewish synagogue. This is quoting from Luther's book, for God's sake. This isn't me being funny, which is not funny. I think it's horrendous. He said, Jewish synagogues and schools should be set on fire, their prayer books destroyed, rabbis forbidden to preach, their homes burned, their property and money confiscated. They should be shown no mercy or kindness. Didn't he read the Beatitudes about loving people and stuff and not killing, turning the other cheek? So no.
I think I wanted to play that from the other podcast, because I think you articulated it pretty well. But why couldn't that have just been a Mel Gibson rant? What if he didn't really mean it?
Because it wasn't a rant, it was a book. He wrote a book.
Oh.
I mean, if he was a one-time drunken rant that somebody recorded with their podcast, no, he wrote a friggin' book. I mean, he did say the Jews were okay because they rejected Catholicism, right? He said they should have rejected because the Catholic the Pope is the Antichrist, right? The Church is an Antichrist, so they get a waiver, right, on that. But now I'm here, right? And I'm showing you the truth. And now you have no excuse. If you don't join the church, we should, we should, like that quote. It said, I recommend flailing them with an
Flail?
axe or a hoe or a spade or a distaff. Um, you know,
See, he didn't.
but it's racial, but it's not racial. It's religious. Just like he was anti-Catholicism, which were good, honest Aryan, you know, Germans. You could convert if you converted as a Jew. Apparently, not like Catholic with Spain, right? You were considered a mudblood if you were a Jew who converted. They never really believed you. There was all this. The Inquisition was set up to ferret out convertos, right? People who
Right.
converted to Catholicism but were actually practicing Jews. I think, you know, if you were honestly converted to Lutheranism, you were okay. But I think it later, obviously under Nazism, it was no longer religious, it was racial, right? But it was certainly set up it was a small line between being just religious and being racial, because they're Aryans who are all the Lutherans, and you know the Semites were all the Jews. So there you go. And the Semites were also Islam, right? So I mean, I don't think he thought it through. No, I don't think he was thinking about racial. I don't think he was racial at all. I think it was just religious for him. But it was a small step for the next generations. So.
So is he a good guy or a bad guy? You know, I mean,
He
the
was a
Catholic
bad guy.
Church,
I think
the
he
Catholic
blew it. I
Church
think
was, but see, but the church had to reform because of him. Of course, then they had the Counter Reformation. But by the
yeah, there was the Jesuits who were
but by the beginning of the 1700s, the Catholic Church had totally recreated itself, and it didn't apologize for anything because they didn't do that. But they kind of they mellowed out. There was no more parties and stuff, and they kind of did get on the straight and narrow, and they had all these new worlds to save. So maybe with the help of Luther, he did help the Catholic Church not be so crazy. But the crazy thing is Protestantism, because I was learning about the English Civil Wars later, not that much later. That was so weird because one thing is the King of England during the English Civil Wars, he got beheaded. It's like, wow, I didn't know they beheaded the king. But that was pretty much the Protestants.
James the First.
The Protestants were fighting against each other because they didn't agree. Well, there's also stuff in Ireland with the Catholics, but a lot of the English Civil Wars were Protestants against Protestants.
Yeah, the Prayer Book Rebellion was Protestants on Protestant, right?
That was the Scottish.
I mean, so I don't think Luther saw the consequences of what he was doing. I mean, one of the things, like besides the Jews, right, and Islam, and he was sort of actually sort of tentative on Islam, right? Because Islam, I mean, the Pope was the Antichrist. That was for sure, right? He was the big fart Antichrist, right? But Islam was a tool of God, right?
To punish.
Who was God's tool to punish the Christian nations for falling for the harlot of Rome, right? So he kind of had like this weird respect for them as God's tool, right? Until they actually got to Vienna, and then he goes, well, maybe we gotta stop this God's tool before it gets to like Wittenberg, right? And we all have to convert to Islam. So he was sort of iffy on that too, right?
Yeah, because he was like really
it was
saying
respect only because they were a tool of God, and he didn't see the Pope as a tool of God. He saw the Pope as the Antichrist, right? And then he saw, you know, even other Protestants as the Antichrist. I mean, everybody who wasn't Luther was the Antichrist.
That's right. So, like when he was talking about the Ottomans initially, before they got too close, he was just saying he couldn't say enough good things about them. He was like, they have the best management, the people that they conquered, they live the best. He even went on to talk about their Sharia law is the most awesome thing. Martin Luther overplayed every situation. He just like took everything to the nth degree. It was
Yeah.
like he went so far because I just think he loved to hear himself talk. He loved to hear himself write. He just was, because he didn't have anything else going for him, right? He wasn't fighting in battles. He wasn't a Renaissance person at all. Let's talk about what a Renaissance person. You not only had to be a sculptor and a painter and write plays and no philosophy and no architecture. I mean, he was just happened to be living during the Renaissance. He had nothing to do. He was completely non-renaissanceal. He didn't. He's so damn boring.
Renaissanceal. Yeah, no, exactly. The Renaissance is almost by definition a philosophy of being optimistic, right? Future orientated. This is a rebirth. This is a rebirth into something better, right? It's a rebirth of the classics and the perfection of man, and Da Vinci and Leonardo and all the artists and the beauty. Of course, it had to be paid for off the gold that they're stealing from the New World, and the money from the peasants being ripped off by selling fake indulgences. But the idea was that it was a time of rebirth, right? Where Lutheranism, it's all end of the world crap, right? It's like, this is God's judgment's coming, and it's our job to help him along with that judgment by killing Jews and killing Catholics and killing just about everybody who doesn't agree with me, and including the other Protestants. So it was tragic because there, I mean, so what happened was, it was the time of the Renaissance, right, where the popes were actually getting powerful again, because before that, they had the popes in Catholicism were having a really hard time. First, they had the Crusades, which were a disaster, right? They had like 7 Crusades, and they only won one of them. They lost 6 Crusades, right?
That caused a lot
And
of
in the
money.
4th Crusade, it cost a lot of money, right? So they lost 6 Crusades. In one of the Crusades, they ended up fighting other Christians and never even got to the Holy Land. And then after that, the Pope got moved to France, right? Because of the 100-Year War, the French didn't want him in Italy, so the French kidnapped the Pope and moved him to France for like 80 years. And then when they tried to move him back, it turned out to be there was 3 popes at one time, right? Because everybody was electing their own pope. And then after the conciliarial moment came along, and they says, well, they fired all 3 popes and made a 4th pope, which I guess there was 4 popes for a little while. And so it was, the Catholic Church was in a mess, right? It was only when we got to what you said, Julius, the warrior pope, who was a warrior, who was a soldier,
Yeah.
and he went into battle with a sword, that popes started getting their power back. So the popes had just got their power back. They weren't going to give it over to Luther, right? They were going to defend their power as much as they could. Like 3 popes after getting the popes back to Rome, Luther shows up, the Renaissance shows up, humanism shows up, and the whole thing starts falling apart again, which I think is actually, like you said, is the best thing that could have happened to Catholicism, right? Because it was no longer, it kind of sort of separated from all the political stuff that was going on, right? They could just concentrate on being Catholics and not being Renaissance princesses and selling. All of those popes bought the popehood for borrowing money from the Fugger Bank and the Medici Bank. So there's a lot of reasons for Luther to be upset with the church, right?
Well, it's kind of good in a way. So this happened. This was around. If you think about it, it was 1,500 years after the birth of Jesus Christ. I want to talk about that in a minute, but so 1,500 years. So it's been 500 years. So we've kind of got that out of our system. Like I said in the beginning, there's no Methodist Mormon alliance fighting guerrillas of the Catholic Church. We don't fight anymore. There's no, it would be great if they did, but they don't. So we
Yeah. I have a
we got
quote for you.
after
I have a
it.
quote for you.
We sorted it out. So we're not
Well,
fighting.
we didn't sort it out, but it didn't matter anymore. Voltaire, another quote from Voltaire, right? He says, you put two religions in the same room, they're going to kill each other. You put 100 religions in the same room, nobody cares.
Exactly, because it's all just, it is what it is.
It's like it doesn't matter anymore, right? I mean, what are you going to, you can't fight all 99 other religions. So everybody just sort of goes to their own little cult.
Yeah.
There are still Lutherans, but I think a lot of the Lutherans I know,
Well, I'm just talking about Protestants.
well,
There's no
Protestants, but Lutherans,
Protestants. That Protestant could be a Methodist, it could be a Presbyterian, whatever. There's no
yeah,
wars between the
Baptists,
Protestants and the Methodists anymore.
but there used to be, right?
There
Yeah,
should
I
be
mean,
still, because they got to sort that shit out. They're crazy, all of them.
sort of shit.
But anyway, I want to talk about the years. At one time that we were talking about the year, so Jesus, like Jesus Christ is in school, and they're like, oh, hey, what year were you born? And he's like, I was born in the year zero. It's like, okay, no, it was some other year. I figured out what year that was. So the year was 753. The Roman calendar, they went back to supposedly the founding of the city.
Yeah.
The thing about calendars, not so easy. It took a long time to get the calendar to where, we only have one calendar, they have the same amount of months and just the leap year thing, because at the Gregorian calendar, there was for one of the calendars, like every few years, they just add a whole month to get it back. So there was a lot of different calendars that were competing. The Babylonians and the Hebrews, they had a lunar calendar system where they'd have to add an extra month every few years too. So the year was 753. Yeah. That's when Jesus,
according to the Roman calendar,
according to the Romans, because and that's whose civilization it was. They ruled.
Yeah. I mean, the Gregorian calendar didn't happen until much later, and then they tried to go back, and they got it wrong. They think Jesus was actually born like 5 BC, but between friends, who's the difference?
The Gregorian calendar started at 50.
And certainly he wasn't born in December 25th. That was just a convenient winter solstice or something, right? Or the winter solstice, which is a good day to make Jesus born.
So that's crazy. We've only had an accurate calendar since 1582. That's when the Gregorian.
The Gregorians was before that. What?
It was 1582. I wrote it down.
But
the Jews had a completely different calendar.
The Muslims have their own calendar. The Chinese still have their own calendar. There's
I know.
Still a few calendars floating around. Yeah.
But really, we only use one. Otherwise, it'd be really.
And the French Revolution tried to come up with a new one.
Did they?
Yeah. And finally, Napoleon goes, just stop it. Just stop it. That's just silly. Stop with the calendar shit.
Stop with the calendar.
But so I mean, the whole problem was that a year is not 365 days, right? And there's not 12 lunar cycles in a year, right? It was some fraction, and that's always.
And we'll probably have to correct it again later because it's not static. If we
they have a correction. I mean, there's a correction every 4 years, and then there's a correction every 10 years, and then a correction every 100 years, and a correction every 1,000 years. So if you live long enough, you're going to see a centennial correction, and then they'll do a millennial correction. Not that it matters. We probably won't be here, right? But we won't for sure. But the
goofy historian podcast will be. They'll just have other people. We'll go through hosts like the church went through popes. Just keep churning them through.
Yeah. But the other thing I want to say, I'll get back to Luther, was that, I mean, again, more background. So after the plague of the 1350s, right, all the peasants were gone. And so the peasants got some economic advantage because they could go sell their wages for higher higher amounts, right? And the German princes go, well, no, you can't do that because we need to pay you what we've always been paying you. And so the German, the Holy Roman Empire, reinstituted slavery of their serfs. So serfs were actually, when, as opposed to other parts in Europe, the serfdom and the slavery, and serfdom is just another word for slavery, right? They couldn't leave their land, they couldn't leave their lord, they couldn't marry, they couldn't own property, so they were slaves, right? And so slaves was reintroduced into slavery was reintroduced into Germany right at the time there was massive inflation going on for them, right? Because all this money from the new world was coming in, new agricultural stuff was coming in, and so everybody was being squeezed, right? And the knights were being squeezed, and so everybody was the princes were increasing taxes. The church still wanted their 10% off the top, right? And so when Luther came along and he says, well, the church is the Antichrist and everybody's equal, right? The serfs are going, all right, we're all on board with that, right? We can't afford, we don't want to be slaves anymore. So it was a massive, massive slave rebellion in Germany that rose up against the church, right? Because the church is the Antichrist. So my God, it's your duty as a Christian to go burn these churches and kill the priests and take all their gold and take all their money. And the same thing was happening with the princes and the knights. They were going, well, we're having monetary problems too. Not sending money to Rome is going to help right off the bat. And we're sitting on all these lands that used to belong to the Antichrist and now belongs to us, right? So there was these massive rebellions in Germany attributable to what Luther was preaching, right? And then that's when he said, he actually said that, the princes and the rulers should put down the peasant rebellion, where 100,000 peasants ended up getting killed. And Luther said, you should hunt down and kill these peasants as dogs, right? Because they're rebels.
That's what I'm saying. So Luther he overplays every situation. It doesn't matter what it would. He's going to overplay it. He's so freaking annoying. I don't know. Do you have anything else to say about this character? Let's find something good about him. Can we find that song? Anything? Is he good looking? Oh, no.
Yeah, because in the end,
it's so frustrating for me because at the end of the day, this is all, in my humble opinion, this is all just freaking fairy tales, and I'd rather talk about something more meaningful.
Well, no, I don't think it's fairy tales because he's the one who started nationalism in Germany. He did do that, right? He said he separated the German. What he did wrong was he set nationalism and before the Catholics and the princesses of Europe, the kings of Europe, they always tried to make a separation in a weird way of church and state, right? There was the Pope in Italy who was supposed to take care of the divine shit, and there's the emperors who were taking care of the earthly stuff, and they would try to keep them separate as much as they can. But with Luther, when he realized he couldn't preach to the peasants because they would just get out of control, he said the peasants can't be in control. It has to be the princes. The prince of each province has to take care of their church. There's no more popes. There's Lutheranism, and the Lutheranism is controlled by the prince. So now there is absolutely no separation of church and state, right? It's beginning of fascism, right? But it was also beginning of nationalism.
I mean, you could say that Nietzsche may have influenced Hitler. I think that's a stretch. But to say that Martin Luther influenced Hitler is a stretch of 3 centuries. Nationalism wasn't, you couldn't have nationalism in the 16th century. You barely had nations. Nationalism was probably a good idea in the 16th century because no one really knew what country, when, and where. No, I don't know. I don't
Exactly.
know, but
It
I
was
think
all
that,
empires, right?
yeah. But I'm excited about going backwards into the Bronze Age, and we're coming up on 45 minutes here. But the I like to look at religion the way Elon Musk looks at um, traveling, space travel and stuff, or manufacturing cars. You look at the first principles of things. The first principles of anything is where you really get to the heart of it. And when we were hunter and gatherers for a quarter of a million years in groups of 8 to 10, there was no the gods that they worshipped were the sun and stuff like that. There was no need for a punitive god. The idea of a punitive god came into existence probably when there was about 1,000 people. When you went from a group to a tribe, and if it was 1,000 people, now when there was just 10 people, everybody had to pull their weight, or you knew. If they cheated, you knew, because there was only 10 people. 1,000 people, you can't figure that out. Who's cheating? Who's getting a free ride? So you need something big, a force, a punitive God. And the Israelites, I think, were the first people to come up with a punitive God, right? And it was needed. Somebody that, like, if you were bad, you're going to be punished. Um, uh, the pagan gods weren't really like, I guess we'll find out more as we get into it, but they don't seem to be more like individually going to punish you if you do something wrong, right? It was like, well, we might not give you
Yeah,
any
I don't know if
harm.
if you're going to do something. Yeah, I think the Roman gods, they weren't so concerned about you being a moral person. They were concerned more about how you did the ceremony of killing the cow, right? You
Yeah,
killed the cow wrong, then they're gonna strike you. But besides that, they really didn't kill. It was always about this rituals that they had
that's right. You got
to
to please the gods by
you had to
having a
please the
great
gods,
sacrifice.
right? Like by act, but but even the Israelites had this whole thing about killing animals, right? I mean, what was
They
this whole
loved
thing
it.
about killing
Yeah,
animals?
yeah. They love
Yeah,
to do the sacrifices.
yeah. It's like let's go kill a sheep, and then God's gonna be happy. It's like what's God? He's going, why are you killing a sheep? Are you gonna make me happy if you kill this sheep? I mean, I would be so pissed off if I was God. I'd make him go to hell just for that. I would say, no, I'm kidding, but I mean, what's up with that animal sacrifice stuff? The one thing about the Romans, right, is that they're when they brought their bull to be sacrificed, the bull had to go willingly, right? That if the bull made any indication that he didn't want to go, like he says, "It's not my time, dude, not now," they had to take him back and get one who wanted to go. I mean, they were probably get him stoned and stuff before they went to the altar, but he had to go peacefully. I don't know if what the Jews did, but they just grabbed a sheep. You know, that's what I always think when I see Jesus holding the sheep. I go, where's he going with that sheep, man?
That sheep is pretty, though, I tell you. So, but yeah,
I'm
we're gonna,
sorry,
as we get
that's
into the
mean.
Bronze Age, we'll talk about the different, there's like monotheism and polytheism, and everything was polytheism. They had so many gods, and the Israeli God could have been just one more, but it wasn't. So there's some cool stuff
Yeah,
we get to talk
yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We
But
talk
anyway, are
about
we done with Martin Luther? I think Martin Luther is super important, um, but Martin Luther King Jr. is way more important.
well,
It's more
he's a lot better
relevant.
person.
More
He's more
relevant right now.
relevant, right? But I think Martin Luther was really important in the world historical events. That
Absolutely.
I mean, he got it was the found. I know you don't like to hear it, but he was the foundation of nationalism, where people actually started after Luther. There were nations, right? Luther and maybe England, and then France. I mean, they became countries, right? They were no longer part of empires; they were countries. And I think Luther and the birth of humanism and the Renaissance had to have a lot to do with that. But I think but Luther would have never happened without the Renaissance, um, and definitely not without the printing press. So if he was the true form of Christianity. I mean, God needed the printing press. Maybe he should have brought it sooner. You know,
So he
I
brought
mean,
about.
I mean, if God had come down and says, "Here's the Ten Commandments, and here's a printing press," you're ready to go, right? But no, or what would have been better if God had come down and said, "Here's the Ten Commandments, here's a printing press, and by the way, here's some antibiotics, ready to go."
And refrigeration and a
And
refrigerator.
refrigerator and air conditioning. But
But
no,
yeah,
we
so
had to,
Martin Luther was
all we
the
got for
Reformation.
freebies was the Ten Commandments. Everything else we had to come up with ourselves.
What?
I'm sorry, that's mean.
Well, I missed it. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I said the only thing we got for free was the Ten Commandments, right? Everything else we had to come with on our own. Like, and we weren't obviously.
Actually, and there was 30 commandments, but Moses dropped.
Well, yeah.
It was like, like in the Monty Python cartoon. He was like, and the 10 commandments. He kept dropping them and they'd break. But anyway, so Luther was the Reformation. Then Pope Paul had the Counter-Reformation. And who really cares? Because at that time it was the Renaissance, which was awesome. And after the Renaissance, it was even more awesome. It was the Baroque period. It just made the Renaissance with more detail, more lifelike. So there was all this great stuff going on, and the human mind was just inspired by all this craziness, really.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And the Renaissance artists were just amazing. There's never been a time since where you take an artist, you can, I don't know if people sculpt out of marble anymore, but that guy that sculpted out of marble, probably not a great architect, right? And the Renaissance people were. It's just amazing. If there was any miracle or anything, that was it. The whole thing with Martin Luther getting lightning, he's not too smart. He can't figure out between causation and correlation. He can't figure that part out, but yet he can't stop writing. But, you know, that was a magical time in terms of just the magic of the art. I can't imagine what that was like. How these, and then there's countless artists. I only know a handful of them. And there were hundreds. And they all were crazy talented like that. Could you imagine an architect today being able to paint a picture? Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, now we just have software engineers. I mean, that's what.
Yeah, they all
have a renaissance of software engineers.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. So anyway, if you like this podcast, hit like. Consider subscribing. And we do have some new music. I know you never look at our Patreon page, but we've got some music up there. And hopefully, if Chelsea can get us some artwork, we'll have some. We need new artwork because our profile picture is, in fact, Martin Luther.
It is one
it's like
ugly
we
dude.
love Martin Luther so much that we use him as a profile pic.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll be back soon with another awesome recording or podcast, and we'll talk to you then.
Hasta luego.
Stop recording.